The lead developer for Dragon Age the Veilguard has spoken out about the game's unmitigated failure. Have they taken any responsibility for it? Don't be stupid, of course not. They have, however, blamed everybody else that played it, citing that no matter what Dragon Age 4 people had created in their minds, it was never going to live up to those expectations, which I guess is partly true because in my mind, my version of Dragon Age 4 resembled a bloody Dragon Age game, and it sure as hell wasn't one of those. So let's get into the cope, shall we? Hi everyone, it's Az here from HeelvsBabyface. First and foremost, no, this isn't the big Dragon Age video that I'm working on. Still working on that. It'll come out when it's ready. That's going to be a sight to behold. No, just something had happened over the course of the last couple of days, and also a pattern with the mainstream media once again that shows exactly how much trouble the Western gaming industry truly is in, and also how they are unable to address it in any way, shape, or form because all they're listening to is their echo chamber. Nobody's taking any responsibility for what's actually going on, and expect more crap like this to happen in the future. I'm just desperate to kill time until 90 seconds is over so I can swear my buttocks off. So let's just start with a quantifier first. How many copies of Dragon Age the Veilguard have sold to date? The answer is simple. We don't know. According to bought and paid for shill media website Game Rant, it sold somewhere in the region of 300,000 copies in the first few days due to tracking. However, that in itself is utterly abysmal, and as of the 24th of November, that's predicted to be somewhere in the region of 500,000 copies. The game died a death after about a week and a half. It's very unlikely that there are any more copies being sold. It's plummeted out of the top 100 games been played on Steam at the moment, and if you add and factor in console sales on top of this, then realistically it's likely sold somewhere in the region of 800,000 to 1 million copies or so. Is that any good? With an unreported budget, one can only speculate how much money it cost to make this game. It was nearly a decade in development. It went through multiple iterations before they settled on the version that they actually released. The likelihood is they plummeted somewhere in the region of $150 to $200 million making this thing, which means sales-wise, you probably got to shift somewhere in the region of 3 to 4 million units just to break even. So no, that's not good. The game is an absolute unmitigated disaster, and it's so easy to see why. But the TLDR on that is because it's made for fucking clowns. There's absolutely nothing to be taken seriously here in the development cycle, from the lead developer through to the writing team and every hair color dye that you can imagine there, through to the ideology which now infests companies like BioWare and EA and the Western gaming industry in general. And what you get is an absolute lolcow of a video game made for people that live in Portland or Seattle that are absolutely broke and live off a diet of hormones and Starbucks. They think that a way to support a company is by screaming at actual customers on Twitter, the people that paid real money for the product and weren't happy with the direction, the ideology, the storytelling. Meanwhile, said companies like BioWare will likely support the person that's doing the screaming, the broke-ass activist that didn't even support the game, the TV film, the TV show in the first bloody place, because this whole thing is so cockahoo broken. This is where we are. Remember this absolute fucking clown of a human being who said that Dragon Age the Veilguard was perhaps the best game that BioWare had ever made, so one can only assume by this utterly pathetic statement that it's the only game from BioWare that they've actually played, who gave it 5 stars out of 5 stars, 10 out of 10, 100%. Can't get any better than this. the best game ever made. Well, he's back, and this time he's here to rub the shoulders of the lead developer and make sure that their fifis aren't heard due to their catastrophe of a video game and why the bloody thing didn't sell. But just before we get to that, this is the website that did an article about the so-called review bombing of Dragon Age the Veilguard due to its inclusive characters and themes, because cuckold estrogen-ridden soy boys like this are not ready for the conversation that inclusionary is a gaslighting term for exclusionary, that your ideology is not the be-all and end-all, and if people don't bend down, bend the knee, kiss the ring, they're not an Austrian painter, that there are millions upon millions of people that think that this ideology is buried in narcissism and hypocrisy and is actually very destructive and disgusting, because none of you have a backbone, because everybody is in their bubble, and to actually exit the bubble, stick their finger up and see which way the wind is actually blowing would scare the living shit out of them. And they've been existing in these bubbles for so goddamn long, they have no other opinion than the opinion which just circulates like a stale fart over and over again. But the gaming industry panders to these people, and these people pander to the gaming industry, and while they're jerking each other's minuscule micro dicks off, they don't realize that the customers, the people that are actually important, the people that actually spend the money on keeping your goddamn fucking company going, are going elsewhere. They are becoming non-binary. They are taking their cash and investing it in somebody and some company that will appreciate them. And it's certainly not looking like the AAA Western gaming industry. Which takes us to Corrine Bush, a biological man. The big Dragon Age the Veilguard post-release interview. It was never going to match the Dragon Age 4 in people's minds, aka people that thought it would be a Dragon Age game. So cutting a lot of the garbage out, which in all honesty could be the whole article, but a month after a release, because they don't even edit their own goddamn articles to make sense, there's uncertainty around the game and series. Sales have been only okay, solid, to use EA's term, or to use somebody else's term that isn't brought up in an Age of Spin, solid is shite. Absolute shite. It's sold like shit. And while some people have celebrated it as a return to form for BioWare, no, nobody did apart from the critics. The critics that were told to use that phrase, return to form, by one of the devs. That's why they used it. That's why it's in virtually every goddamn positive review of this game, because you're a bunch of soulless, dumb husks of human beings that just want your access and will say anything to get it, even if it outs you all as a bunch of fucking mindless drone shills. Just to clarify that point. Others have been critical of the direction the series has been taken in. It's as though there's a fault line dividing opinion on the game, and you're either on one side or the other of it. I don't know that I've seen the reaction to a BioWare game be so divided. Well, just to clarify, there's a small portion of people on the we like it side and a massive truckload of people on the this is a piece of fucking dog shit side. That's why it didn't fucking sell, mate. You can actually logically work these things out. In a moment of complete and utter lack of self-awareness, Corrine Bush says in this interview, of course, we've poured a lot of ourselves into the game, and that's just the problem. You simply poured your ideology, you poured your self-insert, and you also poured your current deisms. So this wonderful dark fantasy series now sounded like it was being set in a coffee shop in downtown LA with the most vacuous, echo-chambered, far leftist weirdos that all sounded the same, looked the same. There was nothing in any shape, way, or form that would differentiate one from the other. The most annoying pieces of crap characters that I've ever had the misfortune to play, with some of the worst dialogue I've had the misfortune to ever hear, and some of the worst gameplay I've also had the misfortune to ever play. Kareem Bush then decides to lie in the next question. Did it surprise you at all how divisive reactions to the game were? Did you expect it? Isn't it interesting? Did we expect it? Yes and no. What we know is that these reactions have been part of the Dragon Age journey with every entry. Even if you look back to Origins, it wasn't necessarily hailed at the time with the reverence that it is today. Well, actually, it was. When it came out, it was hailed as an absolute masterpiece of an RPG. So much so that BioWare rushed into production of Dragon Age 2. It was absolutely lauded at the time. People loved what they saw. They loved what they were playing. And it's been heralded as one of the greatest RPGs of all time ever since. So you can shove your gaslighting where you shove your... I also think that comes from reinvention. One of the unique, I often call it a challenge and an opportunity of the franchise, is that it does reinvent itself with each entry. Well, Kareen, you didn't reinvent Dragon Age at all. In actual fact, you sent it back to the Dark Ages. You didn't add to it, expand on it, take it to incredible new areas. What you did is put it in the safest place that you possibly could, West Coast America. And that's why everybody sounds the way they do. Modern language, modern terminologies, LOL so random humor and mannerisms. It was absolutely egregious. It didn't feel like the Dragon Age world. It felt like EA had taken their employees out to some Seattle Renaissance fair and told them to have at it. It felt like the research that you decided to do for this was to watch Critical Role while thumbing through the very latest pack of Magic the Gathering cards. By the way, that isn't a compliment. I want you to be aware of that. It's not a compliment. How has the commercial response to the game been? I've seen stories about sales and they seem mixed, inconclusive. The game seems to be doing okay, but struggling to keep pace with Inquisition before it. Has it been a success from your point of view? How do you measure that? Well, we'll bypass the first paragraph of bollocks and we'll get to the second one. We're very happy with the critical reception to the game. The critical reception of the game, Kareen, means nothing. It is the biggest non-entity out there because your critical response was hand-selected pretty much from the get-go. You don't allow anyone really into the bubble, and everybody that is in the bubble is vetted to make sure that they are going to give the right opinion in your eyes. That's why some of them, after being invited to one of the events, weren't given a review copy to actually review the game itself because you feared what they might say. And I don't think that any of you really thought you were going to get the response from Mr. Maddie Plays, nor skill up on just how scathing they both were on this piece of absolute dog shit. So let's get to the thing, the only thing that actually matters, which is bloody sales. Unfortunately, on the sales side, that's not something we can really discuss because the sales are absolute crap. But of course, as we know with Inquisition, that was a long burn to get those total sales numbers. Yes, it was. But unlike Inquisition, that has more of a divisive nature, some people like it, some people don't, most people are wholly united that this is one big pile of fucking crap. And you're not going to touch anywhere close to the Inquisition figures. In actual fact, I very much doubt you're going to add to the current figures that you have now, even when this gets thrown on garbage sales for a couple of bucks. And the very fact that you refuse to discuss the sales numbers when directly confronted says absolutely everything that people need to know, because sales figures are readily available very soon after launch, almost with immediate effect. We know that Black Myth Wukong sold 10 million copies in 3 days. So your refusal to give any numbers whatsoever is essentially an admission that your sales numbers are absolutely diabolical. I ain't gonna lie to you folks, the interview from there on in just meanders into a bunch of boring crap where they talk about aspects of the game that nobody likes because it was a piece of absolute dog shit. What we did get from it is that they refused to give sales figures, and we know that the game is sold miserably. We know that the game hasn't been accepted by fans in the slightest, and we know that BioWare are coping massively right now, because if Mass Effect 5 does actually get fully into production and released, and I say if, because I'm not totally convinced that EA might have a look at other games like the upcoming Indiana Jones game, like the Assassin's Creed Shadows game, and if those two fail miserably and the direction that they seem to be taking the company and these franchises, the fact that they've moved the lead writer from Dragon Age the Veilguard over to Mass Effect 5, they might just decide, do you know what? Let's cut our losses. Let's just stop it right now before we hemorrhage any more money on a company that lost money on Mass Effect Andromeda, lost money on Anthem, and has now lost a truckload of money on Dragon Age the Veilguard before we had a fourth money loss of hundreds of millions to this bleeding, dead, walking corpse of a company. I'll see you in the next video. You take care. Bye for now.